Hey, so they had a debate today and legalized cannabis for recreational use in Australia today. No, they didn't. But we'll find out why they didn't and what happened in the debate, as expected, next on This Week in Weed TV.
Well, now it's all going to pot, or whether we like it or not. Best I can tell, the world's gone to hell, and we're sure gonna miss it a lot. All of the whiskey in Lynchburg, Tennessee, just couldn't hit the spot.
Hey folks, Lauren here from This Week in Weed TV. Greetings from beautiful sunny Victoria today. It's a lovely cracking day out there. It's been a lovely week, really. So I'm going to talk a little bit about today about the bill that got initially partly debated today in Parliament. This was a recreational bill put out by David Leonhelm, and effectively it was as bad as I'd expected, predicted. I had bet a couple of folks on some words that would be used, sentences that would be almost cut and pasted. Sportsman bets, of course. The ones about cannabis already being legal and the rest of it. So a bit of a step back. So this is a bill to legalize recreational cannabis federally. So that creates a bunch of problems before we even began, but we'll so what I'll do is we'll go over a little bit of this. So about 11:15, David introduced the bill. First sentence: "We won't legalize today." That's like positivity, huh? When you know you're doing something that's just not going to happen, oh, we know this isn't going to work. And that was pretty much the tone of the whole day, really. Till Richard Di Natale came on, funny enough, who I'm always hard on. I was quite impressed by actually today. So what this does, he says, is it removes prohibitions. He had a committee that I noted on here. That they had a committee on this a while back, and the overall report of the committee basically said the bill sucked. He didn't quite say it that way, but that's what was the outcome. So I've made some changes that I don't know if anybody's seen. I don't think I've seen them, so I'm not quite sure what he changed. I just don't think he's got a grip on it. He's contradicted himself so many times, and there's so many politicians that have come out to introduce bills. If you elect me, which has got no chance, then we're going to give everybody $1 million and the rest of it. And it winds up being a voter and a cash grab. And here we go. So that was pretty much the summary of the bill. I made changes that no one's likely seen. And then he says the only way this bill would pass is if the liberals did it in every state. Well, if you know the bill will only work in every state, why are you introducing it federally that you know is not going to work? Opiates at risk is an objection. That is a falsehood. That was one of his arguments. People are saying that if you legalize cannabis for recreational use, it will put opiates at risk. And he says that's a falsehood. So his falsehood is actually a falsehood. And we know this. It's not rocket science. 54% of the world's legal opiates are produced in Tassie by Tasmanian alkaloids. Their main competition is synthetic opioids, fentanyl, by NSS USA, and cannabis, where those that have legal access to both, of course including cannabis, for medical use, 90% of them are for pain. So if you've got 54% of the world's legal opiates being produced in Australia, and their biggest competition is synthetic opioids from the US and cannabis from everywhere, then those are your biggest risks. So Tasmanian alkaloids not too long ago said, oh, well, we'll get to the other side of this. We'll get to the pharma side of the pharmaceutical cannabis, and that's where they are today. So just a reminder before we start, legal cannabis in Australia federally includes everything. So you can legally get anything as long as it's legal in the states and you get state approval. The trouble is it's illegal in all states. So the government likes to throw out numbers of hundreds of people, thousands of people getting prescriptions for cannabis. First off, the AMA doesn't let doctors prescribe real cannabis for anything. So there you go. It's not rocket science. You can fact check this, and there you go. So that was the mistake about the opiates. What he should be saying is Yes, we're aware opiates are at risk to this, but they're at risk to this everywhere anyhow. Um, he then mentions the tax. He goes, I guess you guys could consider the money. It's worth $330 million a year. Well, yeah, that's kind of important. Cannabis is not like alcohol, and folks should have the right. The law is wrong, not the population. Good quote, liked it, didn't carry it through very well. But through the course of his conversation, he was talking about hemp and all the rest of it. There's nothing wrong bundling in cannabis with hemp and CBD and pharma and GMO and synthetics and the rest of it, as long as the people are aware of that. But when you make these general comments about hemp and pharma and medical without teasing out the fact that where we are today is anybody that's got access to legal cannabis hasn't got access to real cannabis. There is no access to real cannabis in Australia. Folks are making a mistake by focusing on access when it's still the laws. And this is why it gets up my nose and all of ours. And we can only keep repeating the same thing. But it's true. And until people get through their head, I guess we'll keep repeating it. As long as cannabis doesn't need to include cannabis, then you got a problem. As long as people that want access to cannabis for medical use can't get it because of the laws, and then you need to fix the laws. It's nothing more than that. So on with the bill. So that was 11:20. Nothing more came out of his introduction. But I thought it was kind of funny. Nobody can pass this but the liberals. But the liberal Democrats. Only the liberal Democrats can pass this in every state. That's not going to happen. Money. It's not alcohol. That was pretty much it from him. Culture says cannabis arrests are down. That was another great one. Culture says cannabis arrests are down, mainly in South Australia. David. No, they're not. No, they're not down at all. I made a note here. Congratulations, Jenny. This was all just a nightmare if cannabis arrests are down in South Australia. He refers to Mick Palmer, AO, who was part of his original committee. Mick Palmer is a legend. As far as I'm concerned, he's a retired AFP, head of Australian Federal Police. He gets it. But he's not so crazy about it being legal recreationally, but he knows that the laws are messed up. He does support it medically, which of course we do not have. So this bill is going jumps and leaps beyond where we're actually even at now. The way the rest of the world has done it, USA and Canada, for instance, is they did medical first 22 years ago, and then they did recreational relatively recently. Everybody keeps wanting to try and jump to the end of this, and society has moved on, yeah, I get it, but Australia hasn't. And I don't know if we can drag them kicking and screaming into 2018 without even addressing where we are today. And that's where I think the mistake is. So culture cannabis arrests are mainly down in South Australia. Then he refers to Mick Palmer saying, Mick gets it, but he doesn't go really beyond that, and that was totally lost. And I've seen Mick in a couple of other things where he's across other drug discussions, and again, it gets too saturated. That was him. After him came Jane Hume. Vic Libs opposed the bill. This is where she said we have 1,375 people who already have legal cannabis licenses. Legal cannabis licenses that are being handed out. She wants to make it sound like they're being handed out like candy. All these growers are growing weed all over the place. It's working great. Everybody's got cannabis. She then goes on to talk about the increased risk of harm if the bill passes. 25% of treatment services in Australia are used for treating the addiction and problems of cannabis. Actually, it should be checking for mother's milk. I believe a majority of the people that have got cannabis problems, of all these schizophrenia and paranoia and ears growing out their faces and things, not the sides, but off the faces. This is all because they had mother's milk. So I think if we got rid of mothers, most of your cannabis addicts would go away. I'm going to say sativa. Sativa, is that what the other buffoon said? I'm trying to be cool. Right, that was Jane Hume. Increased harm, be more harm if the bill passes. They're having to deal with all sorts of issues because of cannabis problems like paranoia, psychosis. Basically says legal medical cannabis is working great. Cannabis for recreational is bad, ignoring that they're two different things, and they shouldn't be. They're there in Australia, but nowhere else. that was much for her. Then Don Farrell, South Australia, Labor, the bill goes too far. 10% of users of cannabis are addicted. Some use tobacco, making it worse. And they went on, they cause a schizophrenia trip as well. They'll also cause more driving accidents. Of course, ignoring for the fact that we don't have tests for impairment in Australia. Labor needs to work for medical use. If elected, we will do more. That was it. He was short and sweet and useless. And again, he wasn't going to come out too hard against it, because the two bills we have in Australia at the moment, they're likely to pass early next year. One's in New South Wales, I now changed the record, which is the Adam Searle bill, and the other is ACT. Two different ideologies. The ACT bill is about legalizing for recreational use. The New South Wales bill is for legalizing real cannabis for medical use. I'm for recreational use, obviously, but I don't let that ideology get in the way of what will work legislatively. We realized this 22 years ago in California, when us hippies were saying, no, we don't want it for medical use, we want it for recreational use, rah, rah, rah. And at the end of the day, the police got up, and the lawyers and everybody said, look, let's just pretend for a moment. Actually, the cops weren't involved yet. Let's pretend for a moment that it won't pass, which it wouldn't and hadn't, for recreational use. So it's medical or nothing. And then the cops got involved. And then the cops said, wait a minute. So what you're saying is currently 100% of people that use cannabis are currently members of the black market, because if you grow it and use it or get it from your next door neighbor or whatever, that's the black market. So if you're a medical user, then technically you're a recreational user, because medical is illegal at the time. But if we legalize it for medical use, all of a sudden 30 to 50% of the recreational users become medical users, and 30 to 50% of the black market is impacted. Is that right? Yeah, I'm in it. I'm for it. The police got involved. That made sense to them. Lots of places, Canada's used that math. And it's true. And it's actually worked out right. As soon as you legalize it, then recreational users become medical users. And then you can buy, and then if you've got the model to where you can buy it, even if it's a little bit more than black market, which is another story coming up in a minute, then at least you know the quality of it. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of bottles of hemp seed oil, which may be good hemp seed oil. Hemp seed is high in omegas 3, 6, and 9. Lovely, beautiful stuff for your skin, diet, salads, wonderful stuff. But it's a dietary thing. It's not a medicine. But there are people importing hemp seed oil that's got no CBD, no THC, no cannabinoids, and importing that and then changing the labels to make it CBD. So then people are buying, hey, I got some CBD oil. Yeah, it looks like hemp. It tastes like hemp. It must be CBD. No. And that's where we're at today as well. So I'm going to move on quickly because I want to get to more of what Richard said, because Richard did a pretty good job. Oh, God, yeah. Barry O'Sullivan came after Richard, and he's the Reefer Madness man. Right, Richard, so we all support the bill, but we need to go further. And he mentioned that a few times, and he did go a lot further. But it's actually the first time I'd seen him get into some of the detail. I've read all of his bills. I've had to go at him for every time he brings out a bill, because it doesn't address a lot of the issues. And he still missed the biggest issue. But I got to give him top marks minus this one issue. Had he done it, he'd have knocked it out of the park. And it was an argument that should have had him go first, but anyhow. He was more passionate than anybody else about it. He knows more about it than anybody else does. Everybody else is talking shite. And I'm not saying he's not a vote grabber, money grabber. I'm not really sure of that yet. But he was saying the right words, so I was quite optimistic as a result of that, which is rare for me. Right. But we need to go further and detail in the facts. The war on drugs has been a failure, and it's a war on people. He said that before. I still like that. Legal cannabis in Australia is not. Oh no, he didn't. I put a note on here. Will he address the current problems in which legal cannabis in Australia is not real cannabis? The law is a mess, but no, he didn't. He goes. There's 75 to 80,000 arrests. Arrests are still climbing. There is no. There was a view that, well, we don't need to change the laws and make it legal because police aren't arresting people. That's crazy. Crazy talk. So we're still looking at 80,000 arrests a year, and arrests are climbing. Because you don't need to get busted for driving with impairment, because there's impairment. There's no test for impairment at the moment. Um, he addresses is not for kids. One of the things Labor had said, or liberals had said, is, and went on about the harm done to kids. Well, we're not talking about legalizing this for kids. This is for adults. But anyhow, that's where they want to focus. And you know, I call it debates where somebody says something, somebody else calls bullshit, and then you get to address it. Here, this is, you can say anything you want. The thing about, I'll go into that in a moment. It'll make sense in the end with Barry O'Sullivan. Keeping in mind that Richard D. Natale is a doctor and been in emergency wards. He knows his way around drug overdoses and the rest of it. He knows more than most involved in this debate, that's for sure. People keep using it. We need to reduce the harms. Legalizing would protect the vulnerable, educate the public, talking about dispensary model for those over 18, plain packaging, etc. Very well detailed conversation. They're introducing another bill. I don't think it will pass, and I'm still gobsmacked that they're not trying to fix the medical model that's half done, 25% done. Fix that, then go recreational. It's an evolution. It's not a revolution. You got to start and fix one right. You can't say, well, this one's fucked up. Let's just leave it alone and let's go on to the next thing. That's a good ideology, but it won't work legislatively. What you say is medical's a mess. We got halfway there. Let's finish that, see how it goes, and then move on from there. That's where this discussion should go, and I hope it does at some point. He addresses not for kids. He goes, you can't overdose on cannabis. There was this conversation with liberals talking about how, it causes schizophrenia and makes your ears fall off and all sorts of things. But nobody, as he pointed out, has ever overdosed from cannabis. And I always joke that the only person I ever know that died from it was somebody with a bail of it fell on their head. He goes, you can die from alcohol poisoning, of course, kidney damage and all the rest of it. If it was all about the harm, then alcohol would be illegal. So, they're saying, you're going to create more harm if you let cannabis be legal. Well, then in that case, just ban cigarettes entirely and ban alcohol. That's about harm. And he mentions the HG word, home growing. Talked about dispensary model for under 18, plain packaging, home growing for personal use, cannot sell to others, penalties to the black market if that you do. Driving should be based on impairment. Yay. Yay! Yay! I don't know if I've heard him actually mention that before. Not on detection of past usage. And then he mentions GST and the rest of it. And it needs to be competitive. So, again, if you look at why they legalized it in Canada years after they legalized it in California, is because the black market. You don't know the quality. You don't know what's in it. And that's the biggest issue here. All the time, people are saying, oh, well, I want this for that and this for that. And you don't want to jump in and say, no. You just, you don't want to taint people's hopes on these things. But, there's so much misinformation out there. It's just terrible. He mentions job creations. Then he mentions that the Greens are putting forward a motion later this year themselves. And then he basically said we need to drag Australia to be in line with the rest of the world. I mean, it's just mind-numbing that we can't even have the discussion on it without people calling reefer madness BS as fact when it's 100% not fact. Then we bump into Bubbles McKenzie, Barry O'Sullivan, Queensland Nationals, hardcore no. As an ex-cop, I know more about cannabis users than anyone. Yeah. It's a drug of addiction. Don't ever misunderstand that. Yes, cannabis was trendy in the 70s, and people grew out of it. But you can spot them in a crowd. You can spot cannabis users in a crowd. And it reduces your IQ by 8 points. I remember reading that somewhere. I got to go find that story. Because I tell you, after listening to Barry O'Sullivan, I think I lost 9 points of IQ listening to him. And heaven forbid if I ever smoked weed, I'd be 17 points down now. I don't think I have that many to spare. He goes, and cannabis stays in your system longer than alcohol, at least 24 hours. That was his contribution to the world. Um, he was really having a go at Richard Dean Natalin. It wasn't even his bill. I guess it was because of the fact he was trying to breathe some truth into this. And some of these people, uh, I would love to know what Barry O'Sullivan's view is of Palmer. Have them have a debate of who's right and who's wrong. And, you know, Barry O'Sullivan just reminds me of, we have a Bernie Finn in Victoria. He reminds me of some of the conversations with him. So what next? There was a possibility they were going to continue the debate on this bill tonight after 7:30, and that's why I hadn't done a video. I was going to wait until after they finished the debate. It got interrupted at 12:20 because it got delayed by Henchy. Bless his cotton socks. That, yeah, anyhow, it basically used up about 45 minutes of cannabis time. So what next? There'll be a part 2 of the debate, the continuation of it. I thought it might be tonight, in all fairness. I've spoken to my contact at Hansard's in Canberra, spoken to the Senate. I've spoken to David Lindhelm's office. There seems to be I've put an email out to David's media gal. Hopefully she'll come back to me. Because what the folks are saying is David didn't put in a request for a continuation. I don't know if he expected to get it all through today, but normally what they'll do is they'll have a time set aside in case it runs over, then they'll cancel it. He didn't do that, so there's no time slot anywhere, period, for this to be continued. So I guess I'll have to come back with a date that they can squeeze it in, but who knows. So there are 2 live bills, and one in New South Wales, one in ACT, both Labor. Nothing's going to happen there probably for a few months until the campaign kind of moves along. Unless, of course, something weird happens at Wentworth. Wentworth could cause some issues, and I'll leave that to the others to figure out here. Because if that election goes funny, then we could have a new government anyhow, and the world changes a little bit. So the 2 live bills, one's New South Wales, one's ACT. New South Wales is for medical use, ACT is for recreational use. Both bills will likely pass early 2019 if Labor wants them to, because Labor should be in power in New South Wales and Labor will still be in power in ACT. The ACT bill, which is for recreational use, me personally don't think it will work nationally, state by state, because ACT already has a 2 legal plant limit, and they're looking to increase that. And then if you've got the more plants, then you got to have possessions legal. So it helps push things along a bit. That's ACT. Now the New South Wales bill, love it or hate it, whatever, it's a good framework to use from. So it's like a Word document. You can say, yeah, I like the framework of the document, but I'm going to change all this stuff. Or you can cut and paste it and say, yeah, my state instead of that, till New South Wales. It's a framework. So you can hate the bill and still change it to make it what you want it to be. That's called amending. So you amend it, or you cut and paste it, or you just say, you know, I support it and go ahead with that. So that's still likely to pass in 2019 first quarter when Labor takes over New South Wales as well. So there's nothing more there to see, folks. The debate got suspended at 12:20, ran out of time, to be continued. I'll keep putting updates out. Prior to this, I was speaking to some folks in Canada yesterday. Obviously, they're about to have legal recreational. And it's funny that no matter what the solution is, recreational, medical, there's always dramas. And the dramas in Canada are mountainous, but they're further ahead than we are, you know, so at least you can get it to some extent. So watch this space. Hope that helps clarify it a little bit. Again, a reminder that legal cannabis in Australia, when they're talking about 1,350 people getting legal cannabis isn't real cannabis. 1,375 people have gotten prescriptions for legal cannabis, according to Jane Hume, Vic Libs. The trouble is, none of those have been for real cannabis. The ODC, the Office of Drug Chaos, or Office of Drug Control, recently changed their website where they took all the products off, and now they've got some of the suppliers and some of the details there. I was suggesting that if people wanted pharma poo cannabis, which I don't suggest, obviously, then the list of legal cannabis is on the ODC webpage. And I'd say go talk to those suppliers and see what products have you got that are high in THC and low in CBD, and wind up working out towards about a 15% THC or higher, or 10% or higher, and at least 1% CBD. And then you want to be able to take a dosage of a gram a day for ailments, or half a gram a day, depending on what your needs are. How many of those products will fit those criteria? You've got two, which are real cannabis products. One's by Hortiform, one's by Bud Tech. But they're not allowed to offer them, and that's the problem. Doesn't matter if, here's this beautiful display cabinet, here's all these beautiful things. Great, I'll have one of those. Oh no, you can't have that. You have to go back to the state, and it's not legal in any state, so you can't get it. So legal cannabis does not include real cannabis. Doctors that are scripting cannabis aren't scripting real cannabis. Those that are supporting scripting cannabis aren't talking about real cannabis. And this is why this confusion stuff's got to get sorted out. We need to sort out medical first, and then you can do whatever you want. But until medical's right, then anything you're trying to do with recreational confuses and messes up more the medical side, because they're always going to say the same thing. It's legal, mate. What's your problem? It's legal medically. Let's see how it goes. We need to do more research. It's legal medically. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Yeah, it's legal medically, but not real cannabis, because nobody can get access to it. So what a lot of the activists and patient support groups are doing is they're focusing on access. It's not about access. If it was about access, then the laws would have already addressed it. This is about the laws. You've got to fix the laws, then you can have access. You can't have access if there's nothing to access. That's the problem. So they're saying, well, you can use the TGA, the TJB, the SAS program. Nobody's getting it. Nobody's getting real cannabis. One person in Queensland, but that's way outside the system. There are a couple of people outside the system, and I'll give creds on those, but that doesn't really have any bearing on this. If two people are able to get it in the whole country, and they've not done it via the current process, then that current process doesn't work. It needs to be fixed, and that's where we're up to. Right, peace, love. Take care, folks.